So today I am going to attempt to change the onboard battery in this Zojirushi rice cooker model NS ZCC10. As you can see at the moment, the display is completely blank. That's because the battery's gone flat. The battery you need is one of these things, a CR2354. It's a 3-volt lithium cell. You can find them on eBay and so forth, and it comes with a couple of tabs on it. As you can see, they're sort of welded into place, one on each side. The direction in which you put the battery in is going to be important, so just make sure when you do get to that point in the proceedings that you know which way around it's going to go. It's a good idea to put something soft down on the table so that when you turn this thing upside down you won't end up scratching the top. And there are 4 screws, one there, one there, one there, and one there. Now, one of these 4 screws, when I took it apart the first time around, was a special kind of Torx screw. I'll show you what that means. Sadly, I don't have the original Torx screw, and I don't even have another one I can in fact show you, but this is a Torx driver head. It's a T24, as you may be able to read here, and you can see that the end is a kind of star shape. This particular one has a gap in it, and that's because the screw is a tamper-proof screw. It has a little bump in the middle of it, so really what you want is probably a T24 head. This is a T25, and I've kind of mangled it down a little bit with the aid of a Dremel, and I've cut a notch in the front of it here so that it will accommodate the bump in the middle of the screw and get in there. And what I would suggest is, if you're going to take the screw out, and if you have any kind of a struggle with it, if you can't get exactly the right kind of Torx driver, then take the screw out, put a Phillips screw in, which is what all the other 3 screws are, and leave it at that so you can get it apart again in the future. Okay, so I've taken the 4 screws out and restored the thing to its upright condition, and now what I'm going to do is to sort of pry the upper and lower parts apart. Always easier said than done. There we go. And those should just sort of peel apart at this point. Must be some kind of catch around the front here. There we go. Alright. So that's got the 2 pieces taken apart. You can see this is the cord device at the back here. You can just feed the plug back through there. This is just a kind of a little plastic sheathing that goes around it, and then we'll just lay that upside down and put that to one side. Now this is the piece we're interested in right here. It's the little circuit board up at the front, and it has a plastic piece that sits over it as well. It just kind of shoves in. I think you can sort of see that there, like that, so it just kind of provides a little bit of a protection for the board on either side. So that comes out. Now, down here you can see, I hope you can see, there's a little tab right there. The screwdriver's just up against it right now. I'm going to move the wires a bit. See it better there? Which has to be pushed slightly outwards in order to release the board. The board will tilt this way, and then the whole thing can be pulled out. And the same thing is true on the other side, right here. Okay, so the board is now free to wiggle around like that. So, make at least a mental note of where all the various bits of wire go, and most of these just unplug by kind of rocking the connectors back and forth a little bit. Okay, there's a ground wire, this yellow thing, which kind of sits under a kind of hook over here, so you can unhook that. And there's this brown wire which is permanently attached. With a little bit of fiddling, you can get all of that freed up, and the board should just pull out. And now you can see what's going on. Now, the battery is conveniently located here. That's the battery right there. Okay, and you can see on the bottom of the board there's this circular area illustrated here, and that are the two contact points for the two contacts on this thing. It's going to go in this way round, and it's important to get it the right way round. So I've cut the pin off the one side of this battery here with the aid of a pair of side cutters, which I just sort of managed to get in like that, and eventually I'm going to pull the remains of the pin that's still sticking in the board out. I'll have to unsolder that eventually. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with the other pin, but I'm going to see if I can get the battery up high enough to clip it off, and if I can't, I'm going to have to unsolder it. I should add that you need to be a little bit careful with this whole LCD structure here, which is attached to this plastic frame. You can sort of bend it up. There's a couple of tabs under here, and you can sort of move it a little bit out of the way, but I wouldn't go very far because all of these pins on this side are soldered into place. And if you bend them very much, you're likely to either break the pins or break the LCD. And Okay, so with the aid of a screwdriver, I've been able to bend the battery up a little bit, which gives me a little bit more space underneath it. And I think I may now be able to get a pair of cutters in there and clip off that leg. Just make sure you don't clip anything else off while you're doing it. And there it goes. Okay, so the battery is now free, as it were, and now we just have to figure out how to get it out of its confinement here. Okay, so I actually got the battery out by unclipping this plastic frame, as I suggested before, moving it up slightly and sneaking the battery out through this end of the thing here on the side opposite from all the pins. Okay, and it came out fairly easily. So now I'm just left with two pins stuck in the board, and we will have to take a soldering iron and remove those pins. So that's the next step. Okay, so it's time to pull the pins out. The pins that we're going to pull out is this one here and this one here. Make sure you know which ones you are pulling out. Take a pair of pliers around the other side and grasp the stub end of the pin that you're trying to remove and touch it up here. Try not to apply any more heat than you absolutely have to. Okay, and there's one pin. Alright, so what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to get this pin out with the pliers through this way, that is to say grasping the thing sideways rather than by the top. Yep. Okay, and we have the pin. Okay, so that now leaves us free to clean out the holes and install the new battery. So I don't know how clearly you can see this, but this hole here, this pinhole here on the end of the screwdriver, is now essentially just a rectangular opening. I've pulled most of the solder out of that, and what I used to do that, there are many ways of doing this, but what I used was this stuff. It's called solder wick, and it looks like braided wire. And what you do is you heat it up with a soldering iron, and it sort of sucks the solder out of the thing. Then you take it away quick before it latches onto this thing. So I'm going to try and do the same thing with the other hole here, so that you can see how it's done. Now, when you do this, you get a certain amount of solder actually on the end of it, and so you just clip the end off and discard it. And then we're going to do this hole here, so we'll try that. So I'm going to get that hot over the top of that, and okay, that's not quite enough, but you can see that I took some solder out. So we'll see if we can get a little bit more. Okay, and that appears to have done the trick. There is now, as far as I can see, an opening there. Let's see whether or not we can get this. Okay, and we're looking at the hole on the end of that thing there, and there is now a gap in the middle where it all used to be shiny. So we've got both pins clear now, and we can proceed to wrestle the new battery into place. So just let me reiterate how important it is to get the battery the right way around. You can see there's a little plus sign on the board somewhere around about there, and on the battery you will notice that this side, the side which is up, you can't really see it very clearly here, but there's a plus sign partly obscured by that thing there. So it's this tab has to go to that plus sign. So the battery's going to go in this way round. This is very important. Alright, so you may recall that the original battery, I've got it more or less into place here, but the original battery was not quite flat to the board. I shoved a little piece of cardboard underneath just to kind of space it off from the top of the board, but that does still leave us with a reasonable amount of pin sticking through from the bottom. I don't know if you can see them very well there, but you should be able to see the two pins sticking through. So now I'm going to solder that all into place. So actually what I've done, and you can see the display is now doing something. I haven't soldered the battery in yet, but what I've done on the back side of this thing is I have actually twisted the pins slightly. I just took a pair of pliers and applied a little bit of twist to them so that it will anchor well into the sockets while I solder it in place. So I think we're into the final stages of installation of battery here. So I've got the battery in, I've got it all ready to go here, and I'm just going to do this. Now you don't want to get the battery too hot, so keep the soldering exercise down to an absolute minimum. There's one. The other thing I should add, during the process of putting this thing in, do not short circuit the battery. Lithium batteries can be quite nasty. Number 2. We can now proceed to take out any clothespins, holders, bits, pieces, shims and so forth from the other side of the board. Okay, so now as you can see, the battery is sitting in place here where it came from, and the display is now working. One obviously has to go back and reset everything up from scratch. I hope you still have the instruction manual, because I'm not going to help you with that. And this little plastic thing goes back in here, and then you put it all back together in pretty much exactly the same way that you took it all apart. So as you will doubtless recall from just a few minutes ago, the board is going to go back in here, more or less this way round. Make sure that you haven't introduced any dust or crud into the display areas before you put it back together, because cleaning it out afterwards is not going to be fun. Get all the bits of wire out of the way. And it settles in straight down to the bottom like that, and then you just push it forward gently until the two little plastic pieces engage on either side of it, and the board is now sitting quite firmly in place. Okay, now that may in fact be a little awkward at the moment, so I'm just going to pop it back out again, because we need to put in some connectors, and it's easier to do that when you've got the board still sort of floating freely. Okay, so that one goes there, this one goes how, possibly like that. Did it sit that way? I can't remember, maybe it did. Anyway, it seems to fit. That one goes there. This one with the little pink and white things on goes there. Make sure there aren't any loose bits kicking around the place, and now it should be okay to just clip this back into place. Okay. Alright, so now you just want to dress the various leads out of the way so that they're not going to get caught by anything when you put the whole thing back together. You don't want them stuck in this area here. Remember that the yellow lead one here actually sits over a kind of a hook just down at the bottom here, and that's really just to keep it from flopping around the place and getting in the way. Okay, so everything's back together to that extent. Now, the next tricky bit is the cord holder, this piece here. So eventually what's going to have to happen is that this little thing here has to fit into a slot just down the bottom here, and this little tab here has to fit into this slot here. So the whole thing sort of sits in place like that, okay? And the trick is you've got to get it to sit that way while you're putting the bottom of it on, and you have to feed this through the hole in the bottom. There has to be a cover over here. This piece notches into a notch in the bottom part, which goes on here. So all of that has to come together, and that's just a little bit tricky, but it can all be accomplished. So I'm going to go ahead and make an effort to accomplish that. Oh, and before I forget, you have to put back on the little plastic cover over the board at the front. and the other little plastic cover has to go on over this thing at the back. Okay, so I've got the little plastic sheet on around here. It actually goes kind of top to bottom, and I've got the one on over the piece at the front. Doesn't really matter exactly how they go. One more little trick. These two little rubbery things here, they sort of support the rice pan when it's full of water and so on and it's heavy. They have a tendency to fall off. So if you suddenly find one of those things kicking around the place, just pick it up and push it back onto there before you try to put the piece on. Okay? And now you can watch me trying to put this together. I think I won. And so there we are, all back together, except that now you can see that there's actually something on the display. And so now it's a matter of going and figuring out from your fine manual, RTFM, about how you reset this whole thing and the time and all the rest of that. And I wish you many happy years of use of your Zojirushi NS ZCC10.